Okay. So. Well, I really like the fact that it's an RPG, which means that if I'm playing with people who don't do tabletop,
right,
we can still play Rec Age.
Exactly.
And
you can introduce them to tabletop.
Exactly. I can kind of weasel my way in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very cool. So, let's see. What is your vision for expanding Rec Age? Like you said, you're working on some source books.
Yep.
What else do you have in the works?
So I've got beta vehicle rules, which are going to bring vehicles onto a little bit larger tabletop. I'm not going to try to push the model count up. What I want to do is just make the board size bigger, essentially.
Okay.
So I'm a fan of like 6mm scale skirmish. So you've got very big tables, or relatively scale size, relatively big tables with a lot of room to maneuver and do tactics and things like that. So I like to kind of, one of the things I don't like about a lot of games, you'll have two, tanks within, 12 inches of you, right across the board, 36 inches away from each other. It doesn't leave a lot of room for maneuvering and tactics.
Okay.
So what I want to do with the vehicle rules is to have a couple vehicles each, and you're playing on a much bigger board. So that's one thing I'm working on. I have 4 factions that are, the background is all written for them. I don't know if I'm going to do source books for them or one book that's going to include all 4 of them.
But these are 4 existing factions or 4 new factions?
Well, they're not new. They're mentioned in the core book,
but they're not playable.
But they weren't. Well, I have like 1 or 2 characters of each. If you want to play the RPG or if you're playing a narrative, just to include those characters to kind of introduce people to them. But they're not fully playable as their own standalone faction right now. None of them are. But I have a lot of the rules already figured out. I still have to play test them, and like I said, it's weird. I'm one person. I've got one other person helping me, and then a couple other people that are really instrumental in giving me great feedback. In terms of whatever. And sometimes it pulls me in a million directions. It's
a lot of work. Yeah,
it's a tremendous amount of work. It really is. But like I said, at the end of the day, if I see people playing it, that's what makes it worth it. There's 4 new factions, 2 cults. One is a drug cult, and the other is is a death cult. The Veil is the death cult, and Church of Fun is the drug cult. And then I have 2 corporate forces. Unicephalon is they were designed to be kind of the overwatchers of humanity, and as all of the other people left Earth, they established a base on the moon, and they kind of changed their outlook and said, hey, we have to really help people. So they're mostly benevolent, but they have their own agenda as well. And they don't have a large amount of people, but they have the highest technology in the known game. And they will influence events however they can, with a couple people, sort of like your CIA type actions, things like covert action, things like that. And then the ARC is a much more militaristic expansionist corporation. They're based out of Hong Kong, but then they send out flotilla armies, or flotillas that carry armies to colonize and basically expeditionary forces throughout the rest of the world. And they've established a foothold on the western edge of the American continent. So they have, fairly high tech, but still dirty technology. So, like I said, I'm not sure if that's going to be a source book for each one larger source book. The ARC is going to have squad mechanics, so you'll be able to. One of the things about the game is every character operates individually. It's a you-go system, so one character goes, the next character goes.
So it's alternated activation.
Everybody, yes, exactly. But the ARC platoons operate as a squad, so they have coherency. They operate all as one unit, so that gives them benefits to resisting suppression, and it gives them benefits to combined fire, so they can suppress other targets more easily, but they only have the one activation. So as opposed to everybody else, might have 5 or 6 activations. If you only have 1 activation, or 2 say you have 2 squads, everybody else is going to kind of know what you did and then act accordingly. But when you hit very hard, and you're very resilient because you're operating as a combined squad that has trained together and operates together. They have battle suits, which are sort of like armored exoskeletons essentially. And like I said, the vehicle rules, that's going to be something separate, and then the source books. And, the order of which all this stuff comes out kind of depends on where people's interest is. You know? I mean, I'm flexible in terms of that. I kind of want to, put my energy and efforts into the things that people want to actually do.
Right.
So these are my ideas, and if other people come to the table with ideas, I'm all for it. I mean, that's exciting to me. When somebody comes to me and is like, the guy who's become my friend who's running this RPG campaign in New York, he said, I'm doing this whole campaign. He's putting it. He made a blog for it. He's posting on Facebook every week.
Awesome.
And I'm terrible at internet marketing, so to me it's great. It's like people are keeping up with it and hear about it every week. I guess my point is that he's come to the table with all this. He wrote a whole story about these little islands off the coast of New York City. Like not super close, but not too far.
Yeah.
So he's kind of integrating the vision I had for New York with his own vision of what the area is, and he knows all of its history and all of this stuff, and so he's bringing that to the table. And to me, that's just cool.
Yeah.
I mean, he's bringing his own experiences that I don't have. I don't know anything about that stuff, and it makes it authentic. And if other people see that, I think they will enjoy it because it's such a legit way to write a background.
That's awesome.
From somebody's personal experience.
So since you've got 4 new factions in the works, I imagine you're going to be working on the sculpts for the new models as well. So take us through the process of how you go about getting that done. Are you the sculptor? Do you hire a sculptor?
I'd be saving so much money if I was a sculptor. But I also don't know if I'd ever get anything else done. So I mean,
sculpting's not easy. I've tried it.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I can do conversions and things like that. I can maybe sculpt an arm, but beyond that, it's a little beyond my skill level at this point. I love to learn. So I will generally work with a concept artist, get something that either grabs the theme or the specific pose, depending on what so I kind of work backwards. I talk to my manufacturer, find out what are their limitations. So I'm explaining it one way, but I actually kind of go backwards.
Okay.
I talk to my So I talk to whoever's going to make the mini, whether it's resin, metal, or I've been talking to a couple plastics manufacturers.
Okay.
If I can get to that level, I'd love to do that at some point.
Yeah.
It reduces the cost. Then I will talk to the sculptor and then concept artist, and then the concept artist will give me something that I will then give to the sculptor. There might be a couple iterations, go back and forth, and figure out, okay, this pose might not work, or the sculptor might say, okay, I like the theme here, and I can just pose it. It just depends on the individual sculptor, and then we'll send it to the manufacturer, and then we get a product back, and I usually assemble everything by myself, or with my friend Matt. So we'll put the boxes together, we'll put the blisters together. We can pay somebody a couple extra cents to do it, but it's part of the process for me.
Yeah.
I'm very hands-on with almost everything I do.
So for your metal stuff, do you have somebody else doing the spin casting, or do you do that in-house? Okay.
No, I would, again, I'd love to learn spin casting. I'd love to learn sculpting. I'd love to learn all kinds of things. But, then I'm not doing a game anymore. I'm just learning spin casting and sculpting, I think you have to know your limitations because you can get spread really thin really fast, and then you get nothing done. Nothing gets done. And, I think that's, relatively important too, is to keep putting new things out, because people do lose interest if you don't put new things out, so I'm, trying to watch my growth rate and do it at an acceptable level, where I'm not going too fast, and then I get in over my head, and then, either, if somebody handed me a bunch of sacks of money, I don't know if I'd take it necessarily, because I don't know if if I don't have a player base, I don't want to spend a bunch of money.
Right, you don't know if you can grow that fast, then you're in debt.
Yeah, right. I don't want to be in debt to somebody for a game that has no player base.
That makes sense.
And that's sort of what Kickstarter does in a lot of ways. You're getting a big influx of cash and people expecting something of you, and if you don't give them the greatest thing since sliced bread, they're disappointed. This is not everybody, but there is a vocal element.
It's been known to happen with Kickstarter.
And I mean, sometimes it's the companies that are screwing up, and I know I haven't done everything perfectly.
Right.
But sometimes people are unrealistic with their expectations as well of what people should be doing. Now, if someone screws somebody out of money, that's a different story.
Right. I've definitely seen that happen a couple of times.
Yeah. So, but Kickstarter says up front, there's no guarantee you're going to get anything.
Right. Because it's not a pre. It's
people are treating it as a pre-sales market, but it's not a pre-sales market.
Right. At least, especially for new products. If you're an established company like Cool Mini or something like that, great. You can use it as a pre-sale.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's Kickstarter. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I don't want to disparage what anybody else is doing in terms of how they're using Kickstarter. I mean, running, Kickstarters that make more than I've made in my life. That's fine. But I also think you're creating an expectation that you're always going to need the newest, fanciest new game produced for the lowest cost possible, and I feel that takes its toll on gamers and on the gaming industry itself. I don't think that it's without its effects, and I think there are some detrimental effects from the Kickstarter marketing and the Kickstarter sales behemoth. I mean, it's millions and millions of dollars. Going through Kickstarter for gaming, for tabletop games.
It's true.
Which is incredible. That's amazing. But there's a huge vacuum from certain large companies that kind of dropped certain games and things, and now everybody's scrambling to pick up the pieces. But gamers, it's an aging demographic. I don't know if there's so many other things that keep people interested and engaged besides tabletop gaming. I don't know if there's that many new young kids getting involved, to keep the growth going. And if you're not growing, and if you're not able to keep the growth going, you're creating a bubble, and eventually it's going to pop, and eventually everything's going to fall apart, and everything's going to be terrible, and everybody's going to be, filing bankruptcy or whatever. I don't know, whatever. But there's not, there's so many games on the market, and there's really not that many players. There's really not that many people playing tabletop games in the grand scheme of the world.
There might be more now than there's ever been before, but it's still a relatively small
It's
number.
still relatively small, and I also don't think it's growing with the rate of population growth. You know what I mean? And I don't have any empirical evidence on this. This is just what I've seen and what over the years.
Okay.
For example, do you see a lot of kids under 18 here? I don't. Very few.
Well, AdeptiCon's kind of a drinking con, so.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying, but even Gen Con,
Yeah.
There are a lot more younger people there in general, but it's not tabletop gaming specific.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's people, anime and cosplay. You've got all this other stuff that's kind of.
I wonder if that's because mini wargaming just appeals to older people as people get older. Yeah? Okay.
I got into it through World War II models when I was 12, and then started playing with dice and I'm gonna play some dice, and my guys are shooting at each other and blah blah blah. I kind of made up my own games,
right.
As a little kid,
right?
12 years old.
So how do you think miniature gamers and tabletop gaming can start to appeal to your younger audience, or do you think that's?
There's so many different ways that, you've got companies that are doing, like we were talking about a company that's doing the online smartphone app,
right?
And then there's some large painted toy company that's sort of loosely got a war gaming element to it. It's got a smartphone thing. I can't remember the name of it, but it's in Toys R Us and stuff. It's not a war game per se, but you play with it on your smartphone and monsters battle each other somehow. I can't for the life of me remember the name of it.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think I read a Penny Arcade comic about that, but I don't know for sure. I know Crossmaster.
No, it's not.
But it's not Crossmaster. But I've seen a lot of young kids get involved in that. But.
Right. And you've got Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and all that stuff. So you've got a lot of games that are going to cards, but you're going to have purists who are turned off by that. And so there's just a lot of things to weigh. And honestly, I don't know how to get a lot more young kids involved. I mean, other than like be friendly to your kids. You know,
Yeah.
if you hate kids, they're not going to want to play your game.
Right.
I mean, if a kid plays my game, I don't care if they're not going to buy anything. It's like, yeah, play the game. You know, I mean,
have some fun with it.
It's a game. That's the key thing. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like in our first Kickstarter we included a quote, and I'm going to botch it, but it's you don't grow old because you don't stop playing because you grow old. You grow old because you stop playing.
Right.
You know, and that's ultimately what I mean, there's no fountain of youth, but I mean, as long as you can, enjoy your life and have a good time and don't lose that kid inside of you, you're going to have a much better life, I think. At least I hope.
Hopefully.
So, yeah, right. So ultimately this stuff helps have a good life, have a fun time. Ideally, hopefully, that might be a little bit over ambitious. But, I don't know.
Well, great. Thank you for taking the time to tell us about the process you've gone through for Rec Age and giving us a little bit of a better idea of what you've been doing with the Rec Age and the idea and concept behind it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everybody. This is Ryan from the Elite Wing. We will talk to you later. Bye.